They tried to bury my name under the weight of my past, but truth has a way of crawling out of the darkness. I wasn't born a symbol. I was born a man, flawed and angry. But the fire that burned inside me, that fire lit a path millions would follow. This is the story of how Malcolm Little became Malcolm X, Omaha, Nebraska, 1925. The wind swept across the dry plains, rattling the windows of a small wooden house that stood defiantly against a world full of hate. Inside, a young boy named Malcolm Little lay awake, eyes wide open, listening. It wasn't the wind that kept him up. It was the silence that came after his father's voice stopped echoing in the next room. His father, Earl Little, was a proud man, a preacher, and a follower of Marcus Garvey. He had dreams of black pride, black ownership, and black freedom. But in 1925, America, that kind of pride came with a price. Earl's sermons brought fire to the pulpit and fear to white men who heard them. It wasn't long before those white men, the Klan, the Black Legion, or maybe just neighbors in starched collars, made their presence known. They rode by the house at night on horseback, shouting slurs, cracking whips, throwing bricks through the windows. Malcolm saw it all. He was just a child, but children know when something is coming to an end. One night, Malcolm's father came home bloodied and bruised. "You don't ever run from a man, Malcolm," he said, clutching his side. "You stand, even if it means you bleed." Then, one winter morning, they found Earl's body laid across streetcar tracks, his head crushed. The police called it an accident, but Louise Little, Malcolm's mother, knew better. They all did. That was the day Malcolm stopped believing in safety. That was the day he learned what America did to black men who dared to stand too tall. After Earl's death, Louise Little tried to hold the family together. She was a proud Grenadian woman, educated and fierce, who believed in dignity even when there was no food left. But racism is a slow poison. It eats through every layer of a household. The insurance company refused to pay what Earl was owed. Welfare workers came knocking, smiling with pity and suspicion. They didn't see a grieving mother. They saw a Negro woman with too many kids and too much pride. They began suggesting she send some of the children away. When she resisted, they labeled her unstable. Over time, the pressure took its toll. Louise began talking to herself, losing sleep, slipping into rages or long silences. One night, Malcolm found her crying into a cold, empty pot. She wasn't just hungry, she was defeated. Eventually, the state took her away. Malcolm was 12. He bounced from one foster home to another, each one colder than the last. The boy who once dreamed of being a lawyer now sat in the back of classrooms, pretending not to care, swallowing his anger. In one school, a white teacher told him, "A lawyer? Be realistic, Malcolm. That's no job for a colored boy. Why not try carpentry?" Malcolm smiled, but something broke inside him. He didn't forget the teacher's name, or the face, or the tone. He just added it to the list. Boston, 1941. The young man walking the streets of Roxbury had slicked back hair, sharp zoot suits, and a cocky grin that covered a crater of pain. They called him Detroit Red. He was fast-talking, quick-moving, and already smarter than most men twice his age. He wasn't the Malcolm of Omaha. That boy was gone. This Malcolm smoked reefers, shined shoes for jazz legends, and flirted with danger like it was an old friend. He worked the railroad for a while, traveled coast to coast, then ended up in Harlem. Harlem lit him up like a neon sign. He ran numbers, sold dope, hustled white women, and soaked in the madness of the underground. To outsiders, he was a menace. But to Red, he was just surviving. He had a white girlfriend who adored him, a gun under the pillow, and a reputation for being cool under pressure. But the law always catches up. And when it did, Malcolm was caught with stolen goods, sentenced to 10 years in prison at age 20. The world would never see Detroit Red again. Charlestown State Prison, 1946. The walls were gray, the food was cold, the time was endless. At first, Malcolm was furious, fighting guards, challenging inmates, burning with rage. But a fire that burns without direction only turns to ash. It was in that cell, among the steel and silence, that Malcolm began to rebuild himself. He read everything: dictionaries, history, philosophy, law, theology. He devoured books like a starving man devours bread. He copied the entire dictionary by hand, page after page, just to teach himself vocabulary. Then came the letters. His siblings had found something, a new faith, a new path, the Nation of Islam, led by a man named Elijah Muhammad, who preached that the white man was the devil and black people were the chosen. To Malcolm, it didn't sound crazy. It sounded like truth. He found order, purpose, direction. For the first time in his life, he was looking inward and upward. Detroit Red was dead. Malcolm X was born. When Malcolm walked out of prison in 1952, he was a changed man, tall, sharp, articulate, and dangerous in the best way. He joined the Nation of Islam with zeal, becoming one of Elijah Muhammad's fastest rising ministers. His sermons were thunder. He called out white America unapologetically, condemned integration, mocked civil rights leaders as passive. But the crowds loved him. The media couldn't look away. He opened new temples, trained ministers, debated professors. He stood straight, dressed impeccably, and spoke with a calm fire that left people breathless. Soon, Malcolm X wasn't just a minister. He was a movement. Television cameras began to roll. Reporters came sniffing. Malcolm X was not easy to edit. He was too intelligent, too direct, too dangerous for sound bites. To black Americans who felt suffocated by polite marches and promises, Malcolm was liberation. He said things others were too afraid to say. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us. To white America, he was terrifying. To his enemies within the nation, he was a threat. But Malcolm didn't flinch. He looked the devil in the eye and told him exactly what he was. Behind the fiery sermons, trouble was brewing. Malcolm began to hear rumors. Elijah Muhammad, the man he called a prophet, was not who he claimed to be. Affairs with young secretaries, illegitimate children, hypocrisy. Malcolm confronted him. Elijah admitted it, but told Malcolm to stay silent. It's Allah's will, he said. Malcolm was devastated, not just betrayed, but disoriented. The nation had been his salvation. Now, it felt like a trap. He started to question, and once Malcolm questioned something, he never stopped. After JFK's assassination, Malcolm said the wrong thing, or the right thing, depending on your lens. The chickens have come home to roost. The media exploded. The nation suspended him. But Malcolm wasn't going back to the cage. He began to travel, to speak independently. Crowds still came. Reporters still chased him. But now, something shifted. He began to soften, not in strength, but in vision. He started to see that white people were not inherently evil, but that systems were. He saw allies across oceans. He saw humanity. He left the nation, and in doing so, he signed his death warrant. Malcolm X stepped into the holy city of Mecca, surrounded by Muslims of every race and color, praying side by side, eating together, washing away centuries of hate. He cried. It shattered what he thought he knew about Islam, about race, about the world. He wrote home, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same cup, and slept on the same bed with fellow Muslims whose eyes were the bluest of blue. We were truly all the same, brothers. He returned to America no longer as just Malcolm X, but as El Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. Malcolm's new message was unity, not just black unity, but human unity. He began organizing internationally. He met with African leaders. He spoke at the United Nations. He was now more powerful than ever and more dangerous to those who once controlled him. The FBI followed him. The nation threatened him. His home was firebombed. His phones tapped. But Malcolm didn't hide. He stood taller. He told his wife, if I die, it'll be for telling the truth. And that's a death I can accept. Audubon Ballroom, Harlem. The crowd was restless. Malcolm took the stage. Behind him, his wife and daughters sat in folding chairs. He opened his mouth. Suddenly, a commotion. A shout, then gunshots. 3 men rushed forward with sawed-off shotguns and pistols. Malcolm fell. The crowd screamed. His wife shielded the children. He was hit 21 times. Malcolm X died at 39 years old. He left behind not just a wife and 6 daughters, but a legacy no bullet could kill. They buried him in Harlem, but the world mourned. Thousands came to his funeral. Even those who once feared him began to understand him. Decades later, his face would be painted on murals, studied in classrooms, whispered in protests. He didn't ask to be a martyr. He just refused to be a slave. And in doing so, he gave voice to a generation that refused to kneel. You may not agree with everything Malcolm X said. You may not like how he said it, but you cannot deny the courage it took for a man to evolve in front of a world trying to erase him. If this story moved you, if it made you think, remember, or feel something, then share it. Comment where you're watching from, and most of all, subscribe. Because these stories matter, and we're just getting started.